Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here for KW Bonsai. Today we're going to be working on a Scots pine. This is a pine that I collected from a construction site about 10 years ago. I collected 2 of them, and I kind of style them differently. The first is more of a traditional style, I would say. The second is a tall and elegant style, the second one, and we'll be working on that later on in the year. So today we're just going to be working on this Scots pine, and the styling of it is there's a tree I really like in town, a Scots pine, and I'll show that to you. It's one of those trees that it doesn't have anything that stands out on it. It doesn't have a great big thick trunk. It doesn't have these, you know, really awesome ramified limbs or anything on it. It's sort of a tree I would call elegant and pretty. So I've always liked this tree, and every time I go by it I say, that's a really nice looking tree. Yeah, so let's have a look at that and then we'll come back. Here's one of my favorite Scots pines. Here's my favorite view of the Scots pine. Really like it from this angle. Here's a view of the Scots pine up close. We'll pan up the trunk. Really nice bark on it. You can see the upper limbs. Because they move around in the wind, the bark flakes off them, and it leaves a nice reddish color, which is the younger bark underneath. This effect gives the Scots pine kind of a unique look among pines, as they get that reddish top and the mature bark down below. One of the things that makes this tree so attractive to make into a bonsai. So the first thing I'm going to do is rotate the tree around so you can see what branches there are and what we've got to work with. So this has always been the front of the tree, and that may change. We'll see. We have a branch coming out the back here, a low branch, which has some nice twisting movement to it. We've got another branch coming off the trunk here, out to the side. Higher up then we have a branch coming off here, off this bend. Another little one here. And then we go up into the crown and we've got quite a few branches starting to form kind of the apex of the tree. Now this tree is really healthy at the moment. You can tell it's got very large needles. It's got lots of buds at the tips here. We've got at least 3 buds on every branch pretty well. That one's only got 2, and this one just has 1, but most of the vigorous branches have at least 2 anyway. Yeah, it's growing really well. It's looking really healthy. So it's a good time to do some work on the tree. The first thing we're going to do, you can notice there's some yellowed needles in here. Those are needles from last year, so we're going to get rid of those. That'll be our first job, and we're just going to pick those out. Okay. So I've removed all the old yellowed needles. The next thing I'm going to remove is all the downward facing needles. We want to clean the tree structure up and see what's going on with it. Right now it's kind of hard to see the structure. Got all these downward facing needles that get in the way. So we're just going to do a general cleanup of all these downward facing needles. And I'm going to scissor prune those off. So I just come underneath the branch and I leave a little bit of the old needle. When the tree is dormant in winter like this, it's a good time to work on coniferous trees. They don't bleed much. When you make pruning cuts, because the tree's dormant, you don't get all this sap flowing out from the cut point. So I'll work away at pruning all the downward facing needles off, and we'll come back and have a look at the tree then. I've removed most of the lower needles on the branches. We can see the structure a little more clearly now. There's still going to be some needle removal. You can see on this branch there's still a lot of needles from probably 2 years ago. Some needles to be removed. So those yellow ones must have been 3-year-old needles. These are from last year, and then these are the growth from this year. So the next thing we want to do is we want to pick a front for the tree. This kind of was the front. Has been for some time, so let's just mark that. I'm just going to get the exact front from here. Yeah, it was somewhere about here. And the other front I see is the other side of the tree. So somewhere about here. So I'm just going to mark that too. So it is possible to have this as a front also, where the tree comes towards you. It's definitely a possibility. We'll mark that one too. So we'll mark this as a possible front also. And let's just go around the tree and we'll discuss the pros and cons of the different fronts. So the old front, which is a yellow marker, just chip some bark off. That's okay. It's getting a little loose. From this front, it has a nice root spread. It shows probably the widest base that the tree can have from this angle, or the opposite, which is the purple angle. The tree has some movement, and it comes off to the left-hand side. Most of our branches our first branch is going behind the tree, so it's like a back branch. And then our second branch comes towards the viewer to the right, and then our next branch comes to the left, but again it's sort of a back branch. And then our apex comes up and it kind of goes towards the back of the tree and then comes forward again. So it's a possible front. It has some merits. If we go to this is the front. We get some good movement at the base of the trunk. It kind of has a nice twist to it. There's no branches sticking straight out at us. There's a few little ones here, but basically all the branches don't poke you in the eye or anything. It's got some good depth, these back branches. The disadvantage of this view is the tree is quite straight in the upper section. It has a lot of movement, but it's maybe not as dynamic as some of the other views. Certainly nothing wrong with that view, but not as interesting as some of the other views. Now let's go to this view, which is our purple view. Again, from this view we get a nice wide buttressing of the roots at the base here. So it's got good nabari. The trunk comes towards us, goes up, comes off to the right hand side. Our first branch is to the left, kind of coming towards you. Our second branch is also to the left, but towards the back of the tree. Then we have a branch coming off to the right, coming towards you. And our apex is also coming towards you. And it's got some good back branches in the apex also. So it's actually, the purple is a really nice front. So for me, the decision is between the purple here or the yellow. I'm going to decide, and I'll come back and I'll tell you why I've chosen the front I've chosen. I've made my decision, and the decision is the purple front, and I'll explain why. The trunk comes towards you here at the base, which I wouldn't say that's ideal. If I had a choice, I would probably prefer this as the base of the tree, but it's not bad here at the purple front. It kind of comes towards you, and there are a lot of good surface roots in this area. So I think it'll be quite a nice front in the end. The reason I've chosen this as the front is that the branches come out and gives a really good depth to the tree. It has nice foliage out front, and the trunk, is quite far back from your first branch, and then the apex comes towards you. It almost invites the viewer to kind of go up the trunk and look at the branches and find the trunk in the branches. Whereas my second choice was the yellow front here. The trunk is very exposed, the trunk line here. There's nothing kind of in front of it hiding it. All the branches are kind of going to the back of the tree. Gives a good, rear depth to the tree, but it doesn't really invite you in to look at the trunk. The trunk is kind of the first thing you notice. There's a trunk there and you can see the whole shape of it. Whereas this view, it kind of more invites you in to explore the tree. So I just find it more interesting in this view. There's a lot of back branches here we can develop to give it more rearward depth, or more depth to the rear of the tree. It's got lots out front, and it's got a nice apex forming. So we're going to pick the purple as the front of the tree. That's what I did. So we'll take out our other markers, and that's what we'll go with. And there's no, someone else might pick this as the front of the tree. Someone else might have picked this as the front of the tree. There's no right or wrong. It's just what appeals to you. And this is what appeals to me. So the next step will be positioning branches. And as I've said, this tree's just been grown using clip and grow techniques. It's never been wired. And you can see, even though it's never been wired, after 10 years, you've got a fairly attractive tree, a good tree to start wiring. So a lot of the structure work can be done with clip and grow. And then I use wiring as sort of final positioning. So I try and do as much work to my trees as possible without wiring. If I can develop the tree with clip and grow, I do. And then if it needs adjustments with wire or fixing branches or correcting things, then I will use wire. But I try and do as much as I can with clip and grow techniques. We're going to start with this lowest branch, or our number 1 branch. And basically all we want to do with it is get some of these growing tips drooping down a bit more, or so they're not so upright. We just want to give them a bit of weight. So what we're going to have to do is, as I said, there's a lot of needles in here. We're going to have to strip all those and just keep our needles out towards the tips, and then we'll go in and wire the tree up, and we'll see if we have to remove any branches. And that kind of thing. So let's go in. We'll start. I'll start removing all these inner needles on some of these branches. A lot of needles at the junctions of some of these branches. So we want to keep some needles at the tip, but not on the whole branch. So we're going to prune it back. Oops. To about there. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Let's count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we got about 9 or 10 clusters of needles at the tip of this branch. So we'll do that for each branch. So we'll kind of balance our foliage so we don't have one branch that has a really strong cluster of needles. We want to kind of balance the foliage to our weaker branches. So we have approximately the same amount of needles on each branch. And again, you don't have to be exact. You just want to, visually look at the tree and say, all the foliage looks fairly balanced on it. You don't want one branch standing out as being really green compared to the other branches, or really thick and dense compared to the other branches. You want them all about equal. And branches on pine trees are very flexible, so don't worry about, moving them around a bit to look at the branch structure and that. If this was a deciduous tree, you wouldn't want to be flexing your branches around. But on a pine tree, they're really flexible. They're built for the weight of the snow in winter that just bends the branches right down and the tree survives. And I have seen some of these trees when they're growing in the garden, not this one, but some of the others, in spring when you get all the weight of the snow on the branches and it starts melting and it gets really heavy, I've seen branches bend right down to the ground. And once the snow falls off and they start growing in spring, they spring right back up and continue to grow normally. But yeah, they can take a lot of bending, these pine trees, spruce trees, any of these coniferous trees. And that branch, I think, is ready to do some wiring. Before we do some wiring, we'll just go in and look at the structure from above or below, and we'll see what needs pruning off, if anything. So let's do that next. So we're kind of underneath the branch. My main branch comes out. It divides into two. I've got a small shoot coming off here, and then it comes and divides into two, almost three here. So I'm not really keen on this one. It kind of comes straight up, and we'll keep that little one down below. So I'm going to remove it. Here we go. It's gone. And the other side of this branch, we're coming up. We're dividing into two here. We've kind of got 1, 2, 3, 4 branches growing from the same spot here. I'll just zoom in so you can see that. I'll try and show you this from above. So our branch comes out, it divides once here, and then we've got one branch here, 2, 3, and 4, all from the same tip there. So what I want to do is keep our two lowest ones. So we're going to prune off the upper two and just keep two. One gone, and we'll get rid of this one also. Like that. And we've got a fair amount of old needles in here. We can prune back a little more. So that's pretty good, that branch, as far as pruning for structure now. So we can now wire it up. I've got the number 1 branch wired up, so I'm going to position it now. And I'm going to position it from, I'm looking at the front of the tree. And we're trying to get nice flow lines to the branches. I think that'll do for now. I'll just show you the front. There's the number 1 branch positioned from the front. So it just cascades a little bit, gets a bit more movement to it. There it is, a little closer. So we're working on our number 2 branch now. And if we look at the structure of it, we have our main branch dividing into 3. So we want to remove one of these shoots so it divides from 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, and so on. And I think I want to remove the one that is overhanging this branch a bit. So if we remove this one, we can keep this as a back foliage, and this one won't be overshadowing this first branch. So we're going to get rid of that one for that reason. And we're going to get rid of a few buds down here, some of the old needles. Just to get it ready for wiring. And the rest of the structure, we come from our 2 branches, and this one divides into 3. So I'm going to remove the upper one that's shooting straight up. So all our branches are dividing from 1 into 2. So there's that one removed. And I'll just prune a few more needles away, and we'll be ready to wire this branch. There. Okay, let's get some wire on it and we'll position this branch. I've got my second branch wired now, so we're going to position that now. And I think we're just going to bend it down a bit. We'll look at the front here. Yeah, I think that'll do. So there it is from the front. Positioned okay, I think. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's got its own space. It kind of matches the first branch. We may play around with it a little more as we go. So the next branch, we've got our third branch, which comes out to the right hand side. So we've got to position that, and we don't want this one necessarily drooping like the others. You can see if we had this one drooping down, the whole tree would look kind of weeping. Usually on a tree that's the movements to the right, we want the weight on the left hand side, so this part looks heavier, this part looks lighter to keep the tree kind of balanced. So we're definitely going to have to do a little thinning on this branch and some positioning, but I don't think we necessarily want it as a drooping branch. Just make it look too heavy. It would fill in this negative space here. I like the position of this branch as it is. I think we just need to go in and do some thinning to it. And maybe if we do some wiring, just improve the flow line of the branch. So let's go in and look at the structure of it, and we'll decide what we're going to do. So here's the structure of our third branch. Got a lot going on. So let's start at the base of it. We have got it dividing into two. And it divides again here. I think we want to get rid of this one, this bud. And we've got another branch coming off here that we don't want. We want to keep this area fairly clean. So then we follow our branch down, and we're dividing into two major branches. We've got a little whip coming off here we can remove. Like I said, we want every branch to divide from 1 into 2, not 1 into 3. Got some needles we can remove from the inside here. And then, it's got a few more needles to remove. Then we've got, our branch divides into a lot of different points here. So we want to remove this upward growth. A little shoot there. And I think we want to remove this little bud coming off here. Clean that structure up a bit. And we've got a lot of stuff growing in the inside here we want to clean out. Okay, so we're still cleaning up the structure in this branch. We've still got quite a few branches overlapping other branches here. So on this branch, our upper branch has some ramification. We're dividing 1 into 3, so we can remove this upper one for sure. And because this upper branch has some ramification and the branch underneath it doesn't, it's just a single branch, we'll keep the upper one, keeping as much ramification as we can. And then we've got one more little one out the bottom here, so we have to decide which one we want to keep. And I think in this case, let me see from the front here. I think we want to keep the little one and get rid of this thicker one, just so we have a little more variety. And the little one's on the bottom. So there we've got our branch structure cleaned up. Just going to remove some old needles here. Okay, so that branch is ready for wiring. And you can see things like here we've got two branches that kind of come at quite an angle. So they would want to be wired tighter together like that instead of being like that. And the rest of it isn't too bad. Maybe just some slight positioning work. So I've got my number 3 branch wired up. On the apex, which is what we're going to tackle next, like that Scots pine I showed you that I really like, the full-size Scots pine, I want to duplicate that type of an apex on the tree, which doesn't have a single apex. It has kind of multi-trunks coming up to the apex. So the only problem with this tree is we do have this one branch that kind of has a dominant apex right here that I think can be pruned off. So we're going to do that. It's the one branch that kind of, you know, sticks up and is noticeable. So we remove that. And then we'll wire all the other branches to give us a nice apex on the tree. So I'll start doing that next. I'll wire the tree all up and structural prune the apex, and we'll come back and we'll see how it looks all wired up. I've got the structure of the apex kind of cleaned up. Got rid of a lot of little branches and stuff that trying to keep it one branch going into 2 branches rather than having clusters of branches everywhere. So I did a little more wiring on this lowest branch. I put a tie against the trunk to bring it down a little more, just so it was on a a little more of an angle than this second branch. We finished all the work on the Scots pine for today. The sun's hitting the tree, so I'll give it a 360-degree rotation so you can check it all out. And back to the front. So this tree's, I've been training it for 10 years. I'm happy with the progress on the tree. I think it's getting there. So thanks for watching today. Nigel Saunders of KW Bonsai. We'll see you next time.